on. We're live tonight. Behave.
All right. Let's call the meeting of Public Works to order on May 23rd, 2019.
Mr. Mayor, excuse me, you gotta make sure the microphones are on.
Are they?
I don't know. Oh, yours are green, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's one on.
So we're going to call the meeting of Public Works to order for May 23rd, 2019. Diane, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Donches,
Here.
Commissioner Ackerman,
Here.
Commissioner Pappas,
Here?
Commissioner Moriarty,
Here.
Commissioner Teese,
Present.
All members present. Is there a motion regarding the agenda?
Go ahead. Make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion on the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes of the Board of Public Works meeting of April 25th, 2019.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Commissioner Pappas has a question.
Commissioner Pappas.
If we could put that off, I had noticed a couple of errors on page 9.
Could I just interrupt just for a minute, because I neglected to
Oh, you forgot about
mention that
Alderman
he's always,
Jettie.
Alderman Jettie is always down the row, so I don't really see him right away. So Alderman Jettie is here, and as the aldermanic liaison, and so Commissioner Pappas, please go ahead.
So I do have a couple of corrections, so if we can wait until next month. On page 9, I was quoted as saying, granting hardships that aren't hardships is something I'm willing to do. And that was something that obviously I meant not willing to do.
Yeah.
And then I think on page 12, I had made a motion to deny the request, and I was listed as a nay. And they had the proper breakup, but I think they just wrote nay on both of them.
Okay, so you were a yes on that? What's the mistake? This is on page 12.
So, on page 12 of the minutes, I had, let me see, either, we were all listed as nays.
Relative to tabling the motion, correct?
I had made the motion, so I would have voted yes on the motion. I had made I made the motion to deny the request.
And you voted yes on that motion, right?
And then there's a second.
You voted yes on your own motion.
To table it, and you apparently voted no to table it.
Okay. Oh, all right, okay.
Well, do you think it's correct or not?
I probably would have voted no to table it.
So it's corrected.
I think the motion was to deny.
They usually list yays and nays, but
I think when on the first motion, it says, it lists 2 nay votes, those being me and Commissioner Ackerman, which implies, but it does not say, that you were the yes vote, because there was 1 yes vote. I think, I mean, that's the way I'm reading it.
because I think a lot of times they list them out in the minutes.
Yes.
Just because you do forget when people are looking through, like, if you look through several months later.
And then there was a motion to table, which you voted no on. I think that's correct. I think it's just not, it's not as clear as it could be, but I think the first yes, the first motion, the yes vote, is you, even though it doesn't say that.
Right, but I think.
We could ask that it be corrected to say that
Yeah,
specifically.
that would be great, thank you.
And the other correction was what?
Do you understand that, Diane?
Okay.
Was on page 9, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and yes, you made clear what that
Are we
corrects.
still doing our verbatim? Because they just looked a little bit different, of course, looked a little bit different than last time that was all. Okay, thank you.
So, on page 9, what's the, do you want that, you think that should be corrected or not?
Yeah, I don't, granting hardships that aren't hardships is something I'm willing to do.
Right, which is not what you said.
Correct, yeah, not some. it
Certainly
would
not what
be
you
some-
meant to
yeah,
say. All right,
Yeah,
so maybe we will add the word not.
okay.
Not willing to do, right? Isn't that kind of the point? All right, any other corrections to the minutes? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak to the Board of Public Works?
Hello, Alderwoman Melissa Golia from Ward 8, 2 Amble Road. I just came to express my support and also former Alderman Presley's support for the first item on your agenda this evening regarding the shade canopy for the play structures at Roby Park. Some of you are aware that this has been going on. The interest in having this installed goes back to 2013. It was brought to Alderman Presley, and then she included me in moving forward with that, so I hope you will support it. Thank you.
Hope you feel better.
Do you,
No, I just,
Commissioner Ackerman?
yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Right prior to public comment, there is a motion for
Oh, to
that
approve the
we,
minutes.
that we might have missed.
Yes, going back to item 4, is there a motion to approve our minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes of the special Board of Public Works meeting, May 10, 2019.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to address the board? If not, we will go to Parks and Recreation.
I move to approve the purchase of shade canopies for the Jeff Warren Fields at Roby Park Playground from Superior Recreational Products of Carrollton, Georgia, through the Buy Board Cooperative Purchasing Group of $58,759. Funding will be through Department 177 Park and Recreation Fund Grant, Account Classification 55, Other Services.
Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Caggiano is here. Do you want to just brief the board to the extent that?
Sure. Nick Caggiano, Parks and Rec Department. As the Alderwoman stated, this has been a request that we've had for probably 6 or 7 years. It goes back where the families have a hard time at the playground. In the middle of the summer, it gets hot. There's not a lot of shade. The way it's oriented with the sun just makes it difficult. We started a conversation with the Morans probably a year and a half ago, and they called me in March and said, "Hey, we're ready to go forward." So there is some legislation that's going to be approved in June to accept the grant, and we're going to make this purchase, and hopefully, if everything flows right, by the end of summer, we'll have this beautiful shade canopy there. I do want to mention in my memo, I forgot, but the poles and the structures have a 20-year warranty, and the actual fabric has a 10-year warranty. So.
Commissioner Moriarty.
Thank you. Just a question, Superintendent, are these, is this seasonal shade? Are you going to be taking them down, or you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so they'll be on cables with turnbuckles, and they're all they go in specific spots, and we would get them down before the winter weather comes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pappas?
Yeah, it does get, it's a good thing because it makes it almost prohibitive to use in some hot summer days.
Mm.
So I think that's a great purchase, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caggiano. Solid Waste.
Move to approve Amendment 1 for a one-year extension to the contract with Casella Recycling LLC of Charlestown, Massachusetts for the transportation and processing of the city's single-stream recyclables for an amount not to exceed $400,000 pending approval of the FY20 operating budget. Funding through Department 168 Solid Waste Fund, Solid Waste Account Classification, 55 Other Contracted Services.
Any discussion? Commissioner Pappas?
Are you just getting this through early? I assume we didn't blow through the money that was supposed to get us through July, right?
Yes, this is Jeff LaFleur, Superintendent Solid Waste. This is just the approval for next fiscal year,
Okay, thank you.
pending budget approval.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor?
Alderman Jettie.
So, has the, so I figured out that the current contract ends at the end of this fiscal year,
Yes, sir.
and so did this go out to bid, or?
We feel that this contract that we have right now is worthy of a one-year extension. Just they've been phenomenal for us this year, and we don't want to take any chances of the pricing going up, so they accepted going for a one-year extension for this.
And could I ask another, and how is the, it says 400,000, is that a set fee for the full year? Or
No,
is it-
that's
Is it gonna
our.
go up and down like it has been?
It's going to go up and down as it has been, and we're trying to, hopefully we won't expend over the 400,000 this coming fiscal year.
Could I ask one last question? And what determines what the up and down is?
It's called an ACR. It's the, I don't know the acronym for it, but it's the ACR. It's a floating market that all recyclers follow by, and then Casella deducts a certain amount for their operating operations at their facility, and then they divvy out the difference.
Okay.
That
Thank
it? Any other discussion or questions? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I'll move to approve residential and commercial wastewater service permits and fees as submitted.
Discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I'll
Is there a
move,
motion, item B?
I'll move to approve the contract with Hayner and Swanson of Nashua in the amount of $393,075 for professional services in 2019-2020 sewer rehabilitation program. Funding is through Department 169 wastewater fund bond activity, sewer infrastructure improvements.
Mr. Dukran is here.
Steve Dukran, city engineer. The reason for this request is to get assistance with engineering on our sewer program. We currently have a number of sewer projects. You can see as you drive around the city, 3 or 4 different contracts. My staff is pretty involved in all of these projects, including the expanded paving program. So we continue to need assistance, and in this case, we're asking that Hina Swanson, who's already under contract to do some of those, help us with some of those projects, to continue helping us with the next sewer program. We have $5 million to spend when the budget is approved, and we have to get plans ready. We have to review the selection of the sewers. We video most of those, and we look at the deteriorated infrastructure and choose the priorities, and then prepare the plans and specifications to get ready for bidding this winter. So we need to get his contract or the consultant on board ahead of time so they can prepare the bidding documents.
Commissioner Pappas.
Are most of these projects ones that you'll have to cut into the road, or will some of them be that lining that you guys are able to do without cutting into the road?
Yes, the contracts or the projects will involve both treatments. We have, better technology in doing the in situ type of treatments, the lining, sleeving, and so on. So we continue to look to do those as a first preference. It's a lot cheaper, and the impact to the traveling public, businesses, and so on is certainly less. But there are some sewers that have gone beyond the point where you can do that, and you do have to do open excavation. So you'll see projects involving both methods.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item C.
I'll move to approve change order number 3 to the construction contract for the 2018 sewer replacement Harvard Street project to Northeast Earth Mechanics of Pittsfield in the amount of $150,000. Funding will be through Department 169 wastewater fund bond activity sewer infrastructure improvements.
Discussion? Well, Mr. Dukran, you want to give us a overview on this item?
Yes, thank you. So we have a project, we call it 2018 sewer replacement Harvard Street. And you might remember, we came and we added Chase Street last year when we had a major failure on Chase Street that needed immediate attention. Harvard Street wasn't ready for the work. We needed utilities to get in there. So over the winter, Chase Street, the sewer was replaced and water went in there as well. The street is very narrow, about 16 feet curb to curb. Sewer is very deep. And in order to get to the sewer, this is full excavation, the entire street had to be cut into, and the curbing on both sides got impacted and they fell in. So the sidewalks got destroyed in the process. We didn't put enough money in the contract, and for two reasons. One, we couldn't, because it was an emergency situation, we couldn't develop a contract fully with a design, including and expecting that the sidewalks will be replaced entirely. Now that that piece is done, now that the sewer work is done, the water work is done, we have to go back and restore the street and the sidewalk, and we need additional funds, and that's the reason for this request.
Thank you.
Discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item D.
I'll move to consider a hardship request from ZJBV Properties LLC to excavate for installation of sewer, water, and gas services and sidewalk reconstruction for a residential site plan at 158 to 161 Temple Street.
So I'll start by saying Temple Street was paved last year, in the latter part of last year, and this development is proposing to cut into the street, and we have a representative here who will explain the reason why he's requesting the hardship waiver.
Commissioner Pappas.
When we did our paving indices or indexes, my recollection is no matter how you patch it, it's the first few years, especially particularly the first 2 years of paving, that really causes problem from the road. Particularly, it's the sub road, and from what I've been reading, can shorten the life of the road, say up to around 30%.
You might remember, I think it was at the last meeting when I talked a little bit about that, and also another meeting when we reviewed the degradation and the results of the degradation study. And what that showed, and that was quite a recent study, what that showed was that from year 1 through about year 8, there's a deterioration of the roadway because of the patch. The most significant being in the first year. I don't think it was quite 30%. I think it was in the order of 20%, decreasing down to 0 at year 8. So you're right about the biggest deterioration happening at earlier years.
Okay.
All right, so we have someone here to address us. Could you please come up and introduce yourself to the board and then explain this for us?
Hi, my name is Michael Malinowski. I'm with Allen and Major Associates. We are the civil engineers for the project. Our client is looking to develop the property that sits vacant on Temple Street right now. We're looking at approximately 168 units consisting of 2 buildings. We've had preliminary meetings with the city of Nashua to kind of start the process for the permitting. We are scheduled to hopefully make an application at the end of the month to get onto planning board. We've had a number of discussions with Mr. Dukren, the city engineer, regarding our proposed intent. And the plan that we have is for 2 utility connections to support the facility, a sewer and a water at the main entrance. We are proposing to do the city standard as for the trench cutback, and then also per Mr. Dukren's recommendation to mill and overlay curb to curb for those 20 feet outside each of the trenches. We also have a trench connection that we are doing at the corner of Amory as well for a overflow drain. The biggest item that we're looking at is, as part of the meetings that we had with the city, was they are looking, if you're familiar with Temple Street, that sidewalk is slim to none, and part of what they've asked us to do is actually rebuild the sidewalk for the length of the project to enhance the look and the pedestrian connectivity to the future expansions for the railroad that's the railroad connection and infrastructure that's happening down in the area. So as part of that, we've got some 460 feet of sidewalk that the project is proposing to rebuild. As part of that, the existing curbing was left in place when the roadway was paved. So there's many areas that the curb reveal is 1 inch to 2 inches. Doesn't quite meet the city standards. So what we're actually proposing to do is, as part of that, is to reset that curb and reconstruct the sidewalk to full city standards. Constructing our driveway, as well as filling in an existing driveway that's about mid-block. Part of that restoration is actually a off-street parking that's been demarcated on Temple Street with the new paving. And what we were proposing to do is actually to saw cut at that demarcation line outside of the travel way, reset our curb, and then mill and overlay approximately an 8-foot wide strip and repave that section so that it gives us, as opposed to the traditional curb and reset where you're only about 1 foot back, you can't really get traditional paving operations in there, get full compaction, and get a nice smooth finish. With an 8-foot wide strip, you can get traditional bituminous pavement machines in there and full-size rollers. Also, as part of what we were proposing to do is seal that joint between the existing pavement and the new pavement. We're also proposing to put a thermoplastic edge line that would re-demarcate the off-street parking, in essence covering that seal joint.
And do you have an estimate as to what the cost of the sidewalk reconstruction?
I do
across
not
the
at this
front would
time.
be? Pardon?
I do not at this time.
Commissioner Tees.
I have 2 questions for you. When would the pavement first be disturbed in your scenario, pending you get the necessary approvals to move forward? And maybe you could just kind of walk us through in your mind when you think you might obtain planning approvals and so forth. And when would that pavement first be disturbed? And then secondly, what is your client's expected completion date and when would the units then be occupied? And then I have a third question. I'm curious as to who ZJBV Properties is.
That's the easy one. It's actually the initials of the property owner's children. He actually owns Joseph Equipment in Manchester.
Brian Tebow.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So the ZBJ is the initials of his children.
Thank you.
We're hoping right now to get through planning. If we, on the current schedule, we would submit on May 30th. And we would be heard sometime in June as our first planning board hearing. I anticipate that we may be June, July through permitting. All goes well between state and local permitting. I anticipate that they could start construction possibly sometime in the fall. If they started construction on the buildings, I would anticipate that probably the sidewalk work would be sometime in the spring. So you're not trying to do that through, you're rushing it in the fall before winter conditions come out of the spring and do it then. Typically the sidewalks like that would be the last bit of work that would be done for that as the contractor's kind of moving off the property.
Okay, and then anticipated occupancy, completion/occupancy?
Typically, a project like this may take a year, year and a half to get through construction. I'm not quite sure of what the market is and sort of how fast they're anticipating selling those units.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Tease, do you have any other, do you have anything else?
I
Three
had a
questions,
question regarding taxes, but I'll wait till further discussion. Thank you.
Right. Commissioner Moriarty.
Yeah, Mayor, I was just wondering, is this part of the railroad district that you mentioned in your presentation?
It is.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That's.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you. Part of the city ordinance, chapter 285, section 13, talks about the ability of a developer or somebody to dig into a road that part of the 5-year moratorium. And section G talks about there's only 2 cases in which the board should approve. And the first one is an emergency. I'm assuming this does not represent an emergency, correct?
What's the second?
Second is hardship purposes only. And I would imagine it's not a hardship upon the city, it would be a hardship upon the owner or the developer. So did this conversation, in my opinion, didn't necessarily demonstrate a hardship, but I'm sure there's some background information that maybe wasn't presented, so.
Well, I think the hardship is that the developer acquired the property after the street was paved, and therefore did not have the opportunity to do this before the street was paved. Now, this, of course, neighborhood has suffered from disinvestment, meaning people have been neglecting the properties to the east of Main Street for decades, maybe a century or so, and we have seen really no significant development in this neighborhood for a long, long time. So we have a Corvo-Ruthier site which previously was occupied by a kind of a, well, you know what it was, but kind of an industrial user, someone who's storing a lot of product, tile, bricks, and that kind of thing, and went out of business. And this particular property owner has bought not only this property, but Henry Hangar, which they intend to convert to 40 units about of ballpark of housing. Of course, in our market, we really need housing right now. We want downtown housing. The vacancy rates are extremely low, and in my mind, we are fortunate to have someone who's willing to come in and invest this kind of money in a neighborhood that has been suffering for a long, long time. If we look at how this additionally might benefit the city. 200 units, which if you include Henry Hanger, that is about the number, could easily yield $200,000 a year in property taxes. And I would venture to say you could pave Temple Street 10 times over for that amount. In other words, the yield that might be derived from a single year's taxes. And in addition, we would, in 200 units, we'd probably have 400 new residents downtown who can spend money downtown, who will be within walking distance of Main Street. So I think that given the hardship that the developer did not own the property, didn't have the opportunity to do this connection in advance. Also, it's not a huge, cut. It's how many feet into the street?
8 feet.
And how wide is it?
It's about 460 feet if we do the full length of the parcel with the sidewalks.
For the sewer or for the sidewalk?
Oh, no, the sewer would be, it'll be our typical, the 40 feet. It's, I think, 45 because of the way we've got the sewer and the water kind of.
And they're gonna rebuild the sidewalk, which probably, he's not giving us a price, but what are we saying, $100 a linear foot or something like this? So if we're talking $100 a linear foot times 400 feet, that's $46,000 just of sidewalk reconstruction. So for all these reasons, I hope that the board will consider this request favorably and grant the request.
Sure.
Yes, Commissioner Tease.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My business practices, I've always tried to exercise common sense, and I'm glad you said what you did, because I happen to think maybe the hardship might be on the city in being able to provide affordable housing, right? And I looked too, I did the math, I said $2,000 a unit, you were being a little more generous, but I thought perhaps at 175 units, it would generate $350,000. Let's just say it's $200,000. That's really a windfall. And what is the opportunity cost to our community if we were not to collect those taxes? You represented that might be 10 times the amount to pave.
That's a guess.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing out a
An engineer, would we know how much it would cost to repave Temple, estimate?
But yes, it may take 200,000 to do one, the full length.
The full length?
Say from where the project is, it's on the street. It's a wide street, that's what,
Right.
so I say one time.
So you're saying it would cost $200,000 to repave the whole street? Okay, well, I'm.
Well,
just
there goes my theory. I was gonna suggest that you think your client would be willing at $20,000 to repave all of Temple Street, but obviously that theory goes out the window.
But certainly a section in front of this
Yep.
development could be totally repaved for much less than
Yes.
$200,000. Commissioner Pappas.
Our hardship is it's very different than, say, a planning board or a ZBA. Because I think they're called a quasi-legal board, something like that. We're supposed to keep our roads lasting as long as we can. That's the function of this board. The function of this board is not to oversee the whole city. And we've had sinkholes all over the place. No matter how you fix a cut, as soon as you cut into the road, it's the area underneath the road that becomes very short-lived. And the material I looked at, someone who had a PhD in engineering, I think that it was 28% life expectancy on a road goes down in the first couple of years. And I really think that we're going down a very slippery slope, just granting every single hardship request. And, you know, I've often scratched my head and thought, if someone went in front of the fire commission and said, you know what? We really need some more housing. And we think we could get more in, if you guys could just relax those. Just relax your fire codes for us, okay? And, you know, if I can't think of a similar thing on the police commission. And this is, I think the problem is the structure of our board. And I'm not taking a shot at you, Mr. Mayor, you have to look over a whole city. And other commissions, I'll stick to the fire commission because that's an elected board. That's the only thing that they're looking after. And I think that part of the reason our infrastructure is suffering so much is that we don't have a board that just is looking out for the longevity of our roads. And I'm very, very glad that we have made an investment in paving. But if we're just going to, if we end up having our roads cut into like Swiss cheese, they may not even last to the bond. I just think in terms of, we're talking about banking and thinking in terms of if one were to get, let's say, a 5-year car loan, and then in the first year you did something to the car, you did something to it that decreased it in value 30%. The bank's not gonna let you leave the car in the as-is mode like that. And I think that we are gone down a very bad path, and I think people are very upset over the roads. And I'm not against people making money, I'm not against responsible development, but I think we have ordinances for a reason, and we're not following them, and it disturbs me greatly.
Commissioner Tease.
For clarity, if I may ask Commissioner Pappas a question. So, I understand your position. You've always had this position. I respect that. At least, well, you didn't in the last minute, but I know that was an accident. So, you use the banking analogy, and I get that, but the one is you're not comparing apples to apples. There may be a degradation to the road, but the other piece of it is there's an inflow of $200,000 in taxes that we can then use to better our infrastructure. So by voting no, which I respect, you may do that, you're saying to our constituents that I don't want $200,000 in the coffers to do better things. I'd rather follow the letter of the law. Is that, I just want to make sure I'm understanding it.
I'm saying we're not doing our job as a board. We're supposed to oversee the roads. That's what we're supposed to do. We're not overseeing the whole city and say, exchanging money and that kind of thing. We're not talking about tax revenues. We're talking about the condition of the roads, and that is under our purview as the board, not the whole, if you want, I appreciate your wanting to think about the tax base as a whole. If that's the case, run for the Board of Aldermen. That might be more of under their purview. But we're supposed to be infrastructure, and our infrastructure is failing. We just saw in the paper, we had another sinkhole. These are getting cut-ins like this are the kind of reason we're having problems with our infrastructure. That's the reason we're having sinkholes. And we may as well just, you know, take this paving money and flush it down our expensive rebuilt, very well rebuilt sewer treatment plant.
Commissioner Tease.
So I don't know, I'm kind of continuing the conversation. I just raised my hand for, so you have the longest tenure, I believe, on this board, correct? All right, I want to slate Commissioner Moriarty or Ackerman. So can you explain to me what actions you've taken over your 10 or so years from a strategic planning standpoint that led to us not maybe having the infrastructure improved over the last 10 years?
Well, I think right now we're kind of in a debate over hardships. I wasn't on the Board of Aldermen. I never looked into paving programs. And fine, just keep rubber stamping these yeses if you wish, but to attack someone's reasoning because I want to follow the charter, because I want to go through our job as the charter, as a board, that's what I want to do. You don't want to do it, that's fine.
I asked, I'm just wondering what has happened over the last 10 years. That was my question.
Well, it's been more than 10 years that our roads have been terribly neglected.
All right, well, anything else? Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Going back to the ordinance, and just as a practice, if you will, about granting hardships and/or emergencies. Emergencies, I understand, but this is maybe a question for the director or to the city engineer. There's a comment here, or a section that says, Section B, that such persons shall execute a bond to the city in the amount deemed necessary by the board, conditional to a whole bunch of different things. Has that been occurring over the last several years?
Steve Dugan can probably speak to that more.
It says yes.
The answer is yes.
Across the board?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. And we must use Mr. Ducrane's, we delegate to him as to what that amount should be, is that how this works?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
All right. All right. I feel good. I think there's been some healthy conversation, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think that, of course, Commissioner Pappas's concern about the quality of the roads is well placed. I mean,
Agreed.
obviously, we are trying very hard to improve the quality of the infrastructure. We're spending a lot of money. But in this situation, we're talking about a major increase in taxes, benefiting not only, which can be used to improve the infrastructure or help the taxpayers in general. This is not, a single unit or something that's really not going to have a material effect on the city. We're talking about a relatively small cut. I mean, it's 40 by 45 feet. Now, Mr. Gadukan has clarified that it would cost $200 to pave the entire road, but this is a long road, and we're talking about 40 feet of this road. And yes, it may compromise that 40 feet to some degree for some period of time, but the relative benefit to the city is, and to its taxpayers, is so disproportionate to that, to the degradation, if it occurs, of that small patch of street, that I don't see how we can walk away from a project that will improve a neighborhood, rebuild an entire sidewalk, and add, we're talking 200,000, but that's per year. Over the life of this street, it will, over 15 years, we're talking millions of dollars of tax revenue, or over 15 years, 200,000 on my conservative estimate is 200,000 a year for 15 years is $3 million. And if it were, whatever Commissioner Tease is suggesting, it's more than that. So I think 60,000 a unit is a very conservative estimate as to what a property would be assessed at, a new construction. So to me, the benefit to the city from this development is very great, and the harm that will be suffered with respect to this 40 feet is very small. And if we find that it needs to be repaired, if we have to spend $20,000 of the $200,000 to repave part of the street, to me it's worth it. We're also getting the sidewalk, $40,000 for a sidewalk that needs a lot of work as well. So, Commissioner Tease.
I respect everybody's opinion, and I think Commissioner Pappas has, I love that she is very firm in her positioning, and I respect that. And I'm wondering if there may be a compromise here where we could figure out the cost, what it would cost to repair it to our standards, and require the applicant to reimburse the city or post a bond for that amount and for our folks to contract and do the work. I don't know if that's a reasonable request, but it sounds like it's not a large amount of money, and it may give us peace of mind with respect to the quality of work that's done, not to say they wouldn't do a good job.
I guess I'm looking to the city engineer. Do you have a reaction to that?
Okay, Steve Dukran. If I'm to understand it, what you're suggesting, Commissioner Tees, are you suggesting that the city accept the amount it will cost to restore the street because we can get a better restoration according to our standard? I would venture to say that typically streets restored by through private development, that's usually done better than by utilities. And the reason for that is, if you think about the number of gas cuts we have in the city, at this current time we have hundreds of cuts that haven't been fully restored. And I have mentioned numerous times before, we just don't have the resources to inspect or police these. And that's why we have, more deterioration on those than we'd like. And if you remember the last meeting, I don't think you were here. Liberty was here, and they got approval for their request for waiver based on hardship. I guess reasoning for that was because you talk about gas. You're not talking about something that's not as critical. But yeah, so the quick answer is, I think because we are able to inspect private development, it's not as busy as say the gas work, and we put the resources to watch those better. And but while I'm here, so let me just make it clear on some of the things raised. So yes, we do carry the bond. We take the value of the work, and we carry the performance bond, and we carry it. It's very well laid out under private development how to bond those improvements. So you carry a performance bond to the point in time where you accept the work, and upon acceptance of the work, and say for instance they get a occupancy certificate at a time, that bond is released. But further, they have to post a 2-year maintenance bond beyond that point in time. So again, we have a lot more protection simply because we have the land use ordinance that does that for us. We don't have the same thing for the average utility cut. It's a bonded project. When the project is closed, the bond is released. The other point I wanted to note is the two reasons we cited for allowing work on a moratorium street are, as I said, emergency and hardship. You don't approve the emergencies. You might notice we never bring an emergency one to you because by the time we get here, it's already done. So utility companies are allowed to go in there, and we deal with the permits later on. So I wanted to talk about, Commissioner Pappas talked about the impact to the newer streets. And I think she's right about the 28% deterioration in the study done by the cities of Manchester and Concord. When we did our own study, the impact to new streets is less. And the reason is because our restoration requirements are stricter. If you have a trench, when you come back to fully restore that trench, you go back, you cut 3 feet on either side, and you go down and you replace all the gravels down to 18 inches, which is typically deeper than your average street we have in Nashua. And then you add pavement, at least 2 inches thicker than the existing one. So that's strict, and everyone complains about it because it's a lot more work, a lot more costs. And so our study that was done showed that there is deterioration, but not to the extent that Manchester and Concord experience. It's the reason why we have the 20-foot on each side mill and overlay. And I presented that to the Board of Aldermen in the year 2004 when we passed the ordinance. There are two reasons why we wanted that. One was not to have that quilt work of patches. So you'll have a nice, I would say almost seamless matching of new pavement, although you'll have a different color for a while. And that works well. However, you have to remember there are two reasons why patches deteriorate. One is if you don't have good compaction. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have problems with the number of utility patches, because, again, we can't be out there all the time, every minute of the day, and they may not be compacting enough, and because they have so many, they're moving faster than they should. So that's one reason why you'll have failure. The other reason is that if you have the joint that's opening and taking in water through infiltration, that water promotes deterioration. The water gets into the gravels and promotes deterioration. And go through a winter, you'll have frost action and all of that. And, notice after a winter, you check, you see those joints opening. And so we have to improve in our joint, treatment. And we call for tack coating and so on. We may have to beef that up in some way or the other. But when we call for the overlay now of 20 feet beyond the trench, that is supposed to cover that joint and reduce infiltration of water. So we expect that to get better performance when you do that kind of a restoration. Again, the other communities don't have that. They don't have that kind of restoration. It's a burden. It's a cost burden on whatever, whether it's utility company or development, but we require that. So I wanted you to remember that. And Michael talked about the sidewalk. Now I have to make sure you understand this. It's longitudinal. It's about 400 plus feet. It's going to impact one edge of the street. And if you do curb work, to install a curb, you got about a foot and a half into the street. It's not deep work. To put in a curb, curb is only going to be buried, say, 12 inches and 6 inches beyond that, 18 inches. You're probably not even below what we call the road box, below the gravels. You're probably all within that area. We've been faced with this issue before, where other developments have come in here and they wanted to do that. And I don't think it got to the board, but it came to us. And we told them the ordinance clearly states if you're in a moratorium street, you have to repave the entire width of the street, even 20 feet beyond the curb line. And it's if you look at that, it doesn't make sense. But we are not in a position to give relief. So we did contact then, and then I did that yesterday, and today we got an opinion from legal saying, indeed, the ordinance doesn't allow what Michael was proposing before, where he'd go out to the white line in the parking area. So to get relief for that, according to legal, they'll have to go before the Board of Aldermen, because now you're looking at a treatment that's different from what the ordinance requires. Now, I only got that today, so I didn't share that with him, but if this does go forward, that's another step he'll have to take. I think that's what I wanted to let you know.
Commissioner Pappas.
So just 2 points of clarification. For the bond, for the performance bond, you said 2.5 or about 2.5 years after the completion of the project, after it's been signed off. Is that correct?
2 years of a maintenance bond.
Okay. So if you cut into a brand-new road, you're probably not gonna see major problems with the road until a few more years down the road. Is that correct?
I think if you have a compaction issue, you should see that pretty soon. Not probably within a year, but say within 2 years.
Okay,
If you have a compaction, probably. If you have, you see the road dips at that point.
okay,
So, because you have traffic, which adds, which helps compact. If you didn't get the maximum compaction before, the traffic will compact for you.
okay. My second question, I remember this from the pavement index workshop we had. So even though we have stricter patching standards, my recollection was you said that our roads didn't fare that much better than others because of the lack of inspection. I thought I remembered that being said at that workshop.
I think so I don't remember exactly what I said at that workshop. I'm thinking of a degradation workshop. Yes.
Yes.
So even before that, I'm sure I was here before the board, and I will tell you that you'd find that the patches are holding better than the surrounding street because of our restoration standard. I'm sure that drew a chuckle because that's expected. But at a workshop, this is what I said. We have it in the report from Stantec, who did a study, said that our patches are slightly better than other communities. And I said, I'm surprised that it's only slightly. And then we talked about my suspicion is that the companies, the contractors working for utilities are not doing as expected because we are not able to watch them every minute of the day. Those are things I said.
As opposed to a private?
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. City Engineer, Mr. Ducrain, I see the ordinance here, and it is what it is. It talks about the number of inches of aggregate, it talks about the 20 feet. But we keep talking about a term called compaction, but yet
About what?
compaction.
Okay.
There's nothing in the ordinance that says anything about what the specification is. Is that somewhere else, sir?
Yes, that's correct. The compaction standards are contained in what we call the BPW standards for construction. So back in the 80s and the 90s, we came up with standards approved by the board for that will identify the compaction needs. And if we don't have any other specific standard, we fall back on the NHDOT, New Hampshire Department of Transportation specifications, and they have very detailed requirements for construction.
Okay, great, thank you. What follow-up question, Mr. Mayor? Great conversation, and I appreciate all the commissioners' comments. To Commissioner Pappas, we have a charter to maintain the roads and things to that nature. But then we talk about, for the greater good of Nashua, affordable housing and that type of thing. If we're gonna look at that, what about the impact to traffic? Does that play into this at all? And and I don't mean to go down a rat hole, but I'm just asking, with all the development that's going on in that side of the city, and I know that there's some big project plans for the roadway over there, will 200 additional units impact the traffic to our?
Well, of course, to get planning board approval, the developer will have to submit traffic study information to the planning board and to the planning staff. And if the law, if it shows a significant enough impact, and if the law would support asking for mitigation measures, that's typically, what they do.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Moriarty.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we know the sidewalks in the plans, if they will be blacktop or concrete?
Currently, they're shown as concrete.
Perfect.
To kind of match the look of what we're gonna do throughout the rest of the project.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor?
Alderman Jettie.
So, when you look at the ordinance, you know, as others have pointed out, the ordinance, you know, says that before you can grant this, you have to find hardship. And that's within your discretion, and I'm not going to criticize anyone, or I'm not going to criticize you for your thinking of trying to come up with a way of describing a lost, what you believe is a lost opportunity here as a hardship to the developer, or the fact, or I think you said the hardship is that the developer didn't buy this property before the road was paved, and now he's bought it and he's stuck with this ordinance. I think, you know, I think the hardship here is that we adopted an ordinance 10 or 11 years ago with the best of intentions about how can we preserve our roads after we repave them. But then, you know, we run into this difficulty when we try to enforce the ordinance and we see a developer, like you granted a hardship exception to Brady Sullivan for the lofts, loft 34 on Franklin Street, because you saw this you know, building with these new high-end apartments and a great opportunity for the city and to provide housing downtown, and you granted them permission to dig into the roadway because you didn't want to lose that opportunity. Last meeting, we heard you know, a family that wanted to put in 4 units on West Hollis Street, and I'm not sure where that's going to go, but the 4 units, you know, may not represent the great opportunity that this does to you. But now you've got this 200 units that would be of great service, or would be great for the city to have these new housing units. And so, you know, the hardship you have is trying to encourage development that you see as a greater good for the city, but you're dealing with this ordinance that really doesn't allow you to do it, and you're trying to figure out some way around it. So, you know, I kind of react negatively to, you know, treating a large development differently than a small development. But I think the problem is the ordinance. Maybe the ordinance needs to be changed. I mean, I know that the ordinance was probably your suggestion, Mr. Dukran, and but now you're kind of suggesting to us that the standards that this ordinance imposes may not be necessary. There may be ways of doing this that would be worthwhile. I don't know if it's possible for to make this connection by tunneling as opposed to digging into the roadway at all.
Let me answer that.
Excuse me?
Let me answer that. So you can try tunneling, but where you connect to the main, you have to open the street. So it is possible to a certain point.
Okay. So a couple of meetings ago, maybe it's that degradation workshop that we've heard reference to, I thought that there was a motion to adopt that new schedule that you recommended. And I don't know where that stands, but I would think that that's a change to this ordinance, that instead of you know, the hard lines that this ordinance provides, that had kind of a softer approach where the developer could pay a fee to depending on the year that they dug in and what the useful life or the predicted life was. Am I remembering that correctly?
So legal has drafted the language for that, Alderman Jettie, and we just recently received it. We're reviewing it, and we expect to bring it to the board next meeting. So our meeting in June, we should have that language for you, so.
And,
I wish we had it tonight, but unfortunately, it takes a while to draft that language, so we just received it. So, again, we'll have that for you in June.
Could I ask, through you, Mr. Mayor, if we adopted this new ordinance, it's probably gonna take a couple of months to do that, a month or two to do that. I don't know how what their schedule is. I've heard them talk about having to go through the planning board, and so it sounds like this isn't gonna happen next month. It sounds like you've got to, this thing is gonna take several months to develop before you get a final approval of a plan. I don't know if it's possible to delay this until this new ordinance comes into effect, because I think that the new ordinance may allow you to allow this development and any other development that may come across, rather than dealing with the current ordinance that has a very hard line about you need to show hardship. It's a 5-year moratorium. You need to show hardship, and I don't know if I'm making any sense to anybody, but.
This could take some time. I'm not sure when the legislation, it'll probably go before the Board of Public Works at our June meeting, but I'm not sure when it'll go before the Board of Aldermen. At this point, I know we've missed the first meeting in June, so that it could be a couple of months before we have any approvals or not from the Board of Aldermen. So it could take some time, maybe even longer than a couple of months, take 2 or 3 months, depending upon as you know, the board will refer it to committee, and so I'm not.
Let me add to that, if you might. So indeed, as we discuss with legal and get into the draft that Director Fodor talks about, we did talk about the hardship being placed on private development, and so legal has some ideas about maybe translating that into maybe more fees, maybe a longer warranty, carrying the bond, putting that burden back on the developer, whoever is cutting the street. So we are thinking about that. Additionally, we are taking this opportunity to really look at that ordinance, deeper, because you don't get that opportunity too often. The last time it was 2004, so many years later. I know a lot of people are dissatisfied with the patching, the temporary patching that we've seen in the streets. And that's because those who are doing that, they are not following any standards, because we simply don't have a standard for temporary patches. So here's an opportunity for us to add a standard for temporary patching. And then the sidewalk issue that we described tonight, that should be covered, because I think it's grossly unfair to hold someone responsible for paving the entire width of a street if you're just impacting one edge. It's different from a deep excavation in the middle of the street. So I'd like to cover that in the ordinance review. And then, in terms of the schedule, as the director said, it will get referred to committee for public hearing. Who knows how the reaction we'll get. If the fee seems to be too restrictive, you'd have comments. You'd have the utilities probably coming in and objecting or challenging, what have you. So it could be a long, drawn-out process.
Anyone else? I guess my only additional comment is that we are spending a lot of money paving streets, no question about it. but we did 30 miles, we're doing 30 miles this year, 25 miles last year, that's 55 miles. And we will be crack sealing 30 miles, that brings you up to 80-something, and this is 40 feet of that 80 miles that's being impacted. So, to me, the hardship is met, and there's a very large benefit to the city. With that, anyone else have comments, questions? So the motion is to approve the hardship request of ZJBB Properties. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay?
And the motion passes on a 4-1 vote. Next, item E. Thank you very much. Thank you. Item E, is there a motion on, I guess we need a motion here to take it from the table. Is there a motion to take item E from the table?
I wasn't at the meeting, but can I make that motion since I wasn't at the last
Sure.
meeting?
Yes,
Yeah.
you're-
I'll make a motion to take it from the table, to consider a hardship request from Michelle Rodriguez to excavate for installation of sewer, water, and gas services for a proposed 4-lot subdivision at 711 West Hollis Street, approved by the planning board on March 21st, 2019.
Discussion on the motion to take from the table. Commissioner Ackerman.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to go back and take everybody to page 12 of the Board of Public Works minutes from April 25th. And there was a conversation from yourself and a gentleman, a civil engineer, Mr. Maynard, that was representing the homeowner about whether or not prior to this meeting today, he would meet with the city engineering office, and prior to bringing this back to a vote, and I'm not trying to be hard, but I'm just trying to follow what I thought was somewhat of a protocol. And Mr. Maynard had asked, was that a prerequisite before the board voted on this particular measure? And you had suggested that it was, and Mr. Maynard had thought that it was reasonable. So my question is, before we untable this particular motion, did that activity actually occur?
So Steve Dukran. So Mr. Maynard has not reached out to us for a meeting. So I suggest this remains tabled.
Agreed.
Absolutely. I would be in favor of that.
So we're gonna vote no to, or if we want to keep it on the table, we vote no.
If we wanted to leave it tabled, either Commissioner Moriarty could withdraw the motion, or we could vote against. Any member or combination of members could vote against removing it from the table.
Mayor, I would withdraw my motion.
Commissioner Moriarty has withdrawn the motion to table, so if no one else makes that motion, the issue is not before us, and we should move on to the next item on the agenda.
Move to approve the user warrants as presented.
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
excuse me, I have to go to the Joint Special School Building Committee meeting. So,
Of course you are excused.
thank you.
That is an important meeting, and we appreciate your efforts on that committee. Where do they meet anyway? Over at the high school? North?
Nashua North.
Nashua North, okay. All right, thank you very much. So we're now on to wastewater, and we have a motion to approve the user warrants as presented. Is there discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item B.
I'll move to approve amendment number 2 in the amount of $56,100 to the contract with Flow Assessment of Auburn, New Hampshire for a combined sewer overflow monitoring program. Funding will be through Department 169 Wastewater Fund, Wastewater Account Classification, Professional Services.
Just, we have Mr. Boucher here to explain this one.
David Boucher, wastewater superintendent. This is the company we use. They have installed 11 flow meters in 11 of our combined sewer overflow sites. Monthly, they generate a report for us to submit to regulators. So this is a one-year contract with them to renew it. We already use their services and we're satisfied with their services.
All right, discussion or questions? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Streets, item
Move to
A.
approve change order number 1 to the 2019 pavement markings contract with Highway Safety of Rockland, Mass. In the amount of $82,000. Funding for this contract will be through Department 161, Streets Fund, Prior Year Escrow, Account Classification, 54 Other Services.
We have our superintendent here, Mr. Ibarra. Could you just give us a brief explanation of this, please?
John Ibarra, Superintendent of Streets. Good evening. So these monies were escrowed and earmarked for a striping program, additional bike routes and lanes and symbols. So I'd like to capture this money and add it to our existing contract so we can cover the additional work in this season's striping.
Questions, discussion? Commissioner Moriarty.
Superintendent, can't we get to a point where our people can do this work?
It's a lot of work. We do have a small crew that stripes all summer, but they focus primarily on crosswalks. This is specialty work, a lot of long line work. That's a special unit that puts those lines down. And then we use thermoplast for the symbols, which we don't have that equipment to do. So this is all stuff that we cannot do in-house.
Anyone else? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Administration. The first is an informational item, which is the budget transfers. We don't really need to take action on that. Does anybody have any questions regarding that or comments? If not, we'll go to item B.
Make a motion to approve the 2019 Sculpture Symposium sites at Bicentennial Park, Legacy Playground, Sullivan Park, and Rail Trail.
Okay, I'll speak to this. As you'll recall, Gail Moriarty came and spoke to us about the sculpture symposium. And when the artists started to look at all the different sites that we had approved, they decided that there were additional sites that they would prefer. So we have some additional sites before us. Now, I've included all of them. You'll note that the Legacy Playground, that one you have approved, but it was so confusing. I just wanted to have them all here so that you knew which sites they had chosen. So one is the Legacy Playground. The other, you'll recall, we had approved 3 turtle sculptures in Bicentennial Park. 2 of the sculptures are now at the library, and they're going to move the 3rd sculpture to the library, the turtle sculpture, so that the turtles can be reunited. They want them together, so the 3 are going to the library.
There's one very lonely turtle.
There's one very lonely turtle, so it's going back to the library. And an artist, Jocelyn Pratt from New Zealand, would like her sculpture to be at Bicentennial Park, sort of close to where the turtle was, a little bit, a few feet away from where the turtle currently is. So that one is one that you would need to approve. It looks like it's going to be very lovely. You can see the wishbone, and it's a marble sculpture. It's really quite nice. And then the other gentleman from Kenya has chosen Sullivan Park. You'll remember that you did approve one sculpture at Sullivan Park, and so this would be the second at Sullivan Park. This has been we have checked with both Alderman Karen and Superintendent Caggiano. Both are fine with the placement of this sculpture at Sullivan Park. So, and then there's also a third that which is on the rail trail. So, I don't see that in there. in here, but. What are supposed to be? Oh, okay. On the, so I'm right underneath, I'm sorry, right underneath Legacy Playground, you'll see the rail trail location. So it's essentially three that you would be approving: Bicentennial Park, Sullivan Park, and the rail trail at this time. So,
Discussion? Commissioner Ackerman.
Just a quick question. I'm sure the city and the Parks and Rec have done all their due diligence and vetting, but for the Legacy Playground, that's a 6-ton device. There's a lot of children there. Or
Yes.
6-ton, 14, is it 14 feet? 14 feet high. There's no possibility of that toppling over, even by kids being kids.
kids being kids.
Yeah.
No, it will be secure. We're putting in the foundations, as we always do for the symposium, and then they'll be making sure that they're pinned and secure, so there won't be any danger, but that's a good question.
Thank you. All right, great. Appreciate it.
Other discussion, questions? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We have another informational item, which is the BPW Retirement System NRO Revisions Memo from Derek Danielson. Anybody have any questions or discussion on that? Commissioner Tease.
Promoted.
Or demoted, who knows? Commissioner Tease.
I sit on the Board of Public Works Pension Board, and I just want to let everyone here tonight know that the changes are generally administrative in nature. Derek Danielson, the record should reflect, did a really nice job in working with the board and providing outlines. And in my opinion, everything was communicated very well to the staff. At least I hope Director Photo would agree with that. And no other questions or comments, really.
I would add that Mr. Danielson just had, he and his wife just had a baby boy.
Oh,
so
great.
Congratulations to him.
David Fredette didn't make them name it after him, did he?
I don't think so.
All right, that was item C. Item D is a discussion item, cash handling.
Okay, so you'll recall that we have had a committee that has been working on controls in the scale. So there are a number of things that we've implemented. Tickets cannot be changed now after they've been printed. Voided tickets must be approved. You can't void a ticket without approval.
Who will approve them?
The superintendent must approve, yep. Or the foreman, the two foremen or the superintendent. That the SMS scale software was taking direction from a variety of people, which is kind of surprising, but they have been instructed they are only to take instruction from IT for any changes in any software. We are going to continue to do credit and background checks. That's something that has always been done. The treasurer is working on a new cash control policy citywide. That's still being worked on. We had met, as we had discussed in our budget, we'd like to hire an assistant scale operator. That will also help. There are some other minor things that we're doing in terms of locking down certain accounts so they can't be changed. For instance, the free fill that's coming in that we need for the setback, those customers will be locked down and cannot be changed, things like that. So some minor tweaks in the software. But the final thing that we really wanted to talk about was cash handling. We talked a little bit about this at our recycling committee meeting, but I wanted to sort of get your thoughts on whether or not Public Works, I don't think we should limit it to the landfill. I think if we're going to not accept cash, it should be division-wide. But I wanted to sort of hear what your thoughts were as the commissioners in terms of whether or not we should continue to handle cash, receive cash, or whether we should go to just checks and credit cards.
Commissioner Pappas?
I mean, if it's possible, I think it's just better to leave cash out of the whole equation. I guess it's probably gonna be the people who work directly with the public. I think what people are gonna get mad about are the $5 landfill stickers. Because if you go in, I mean, most of the Parks and Recreation, their program, it would cost more, most people wouldn't pay cash for something like that. But as long as the people are ready to get an earful, the people who work directly with the public, I don't know, do you have a sense as to how many people pay cash, or do a percentage?
We did have that percentage. It's surprisingly lower than you might think. A fair number pay with both credit card and check. I think that could somewhat be alleviated by giving some notice. It's not something you'd want to say, okay, as of Monday, we're not going to accept cash anymore. I think if we gave residents notice and we posted it, and that it would be easier. But I think you're correct. I think, there may be some people that are irritated by having to pay with either a check or a credit card for a $5 landfill permit.
Commissioner Tease?
I appreciate the update, and I'd be supportive of whatever direction the director thinks is best for that specific department. I don't like saying division, department.
Commissioner Ackerman?
Yeah, I think it's a very timely subject matter based upon the history. My assumption is that the two divisions within the Department of Public Works that handle cash would be Parks and Rec as well as the Scale House. Are there any other locations?
Engineering to some degree, a small amount, for plans and that sort of thing.
And I'm in support of what was just said by Commissioner Tease. One thing to think about is if those $5 cash for the stickers is problematic, something that might want to be considered is a drop box, so to speak. In other words, you have a $5 bill or 5 ones, and we don't give change type of thing, and they drop it in and it's locked. And that way, it might be a compromise of sorts. Just something to think about.
Okay.
Commissioner Moriarty?
Mayor and Director, I'd be in support of doing away with the cash altogether. in
Yes, I don't think we should take cash.
No, I don't think so at all. Thank you. Yep.
I think it just better protects both the division and the taxpayers. A lot of people are not taking cash anymore. You're seeing that. I was at a doctor's recently, and my husband handed a $20 bill to the woman, and she says, "Oh no, we can't take cash. We only take credit cards," and so a lot of people I think are moving in that direction. I think it's just probably good policy. I will say that I don't think that the rest of the city will be moving towards that policy. This will be a Public Works exclusive policy. So I just want to let you know that as well. So.
We're trendsetters.
We're trendsetters, yes.
But the rest of the city may move in that direction, so. All right, so are you going to bring something to us, or do you want to vote now?
We can just vote now to not accept cash, and I think what we're going to do is probably bring to you just a whole, we do have a great manual now that's been developed about procedures in the scale, but I also think that this should all be memorialized too, as well as the fact that we're not going to accept cash and then approved by the Board of Public Works, so.
So is a motion to authorize the director to proceed with the fully developing and implementing the policy of no cash handling.
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion passes. Item E is the DPW facilities update. Are we going to get a verbal update, or?
I'd like to engage in discussion, and then I have some notes that I wanted to share with the group. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I do want to go on record to say I need to leave at 7:15, but I'm confident I can share everything in that timeframe. Before I start, Attorney Liaison Jetty is not here. He and I visited all the sites in a relatively short period of time, not too long ago, but I'm interested to know, my colleagues, when's the last time that you've toured the facilities? Has it been recently?
Yes.
Yes.
Fairly recently,
Very
yes.
recent, yeah. So, Commissioner Moriarty and I were asked by the mayor to address the needed improvements to several of the public work facilities. Title of my document is called Operation Shelter. And we all know that a few years ago, the city made a bold step, purchased the 29-acre parcel in Burke Street with perhaps the hope to move the entire department there. Escalating costs resulted in that project being abandoned for the time being. We do know that there are reported air quality issues. We know of the aging infrastructure at several of our physical plants. I think when I was down at Superintendent Rivera's shop, he patted the boiler on the side and said, I don't know how much more long I have with her. We've made some progress. On April 12th, Moriarty, Director Photo, and myself discussed organizing a plan that was inclusive of all stakeholders. And on May 10th, Commissioner Moriarty, Director Photo, myself, Alderman Dowd, Alderman Wilshire, Alderman O'Brien, and Director Tim Cummings, as well as several superintendents of the DPW, met to discuss possible solutions to provide an action work environment for the DPW departments. And I think it's important, we discussed several solutions. We didn't come with any agenda. And there were many ideas that were vetted. We were very sensitive to the financial impact to the taxpayers regarding any solution. We talked for what I consider to be a long time at repairs. In theory, making repairs to existing infrastructure might be the financially best route to go in terms of might not cost as much, at least on the surface. The group believed that there were factors that really needed to be considered that weren't just exact dollars in terms of repair versus maybe a new build. Those factors included operational inefficiencies caused by the departments working remotely. We don't know what that dollar amount is, but we certainly thought that perhaps having folks under one roof, there were some efficiencies that could be created. Regardless of which way we go, we realize there are perhaps energy efficiencies that could be realized through improvements or a new build. That there are other opportunity costs that perhaps don't present themselves on the immediate balance sheet or financial statement, to include the equipment at the street department. A lot of it's left uncovered. We spend and invest millions of dollars, and this equipment is negatively impacted by the elements. How much more life can we get out of those pieces of equipment if they were covered, regardless if they were covered at the street department by building a new garage or whatever it was? And then I say there were three prominent factors, and I wrote four, so please pardon my error here. The fourth one was just the general, are we going to take a continued Band-Aid mentality versus a strategic direction in doing something for the department? The obvious discussion that we've had at a previous meeting was building at the landfill. I believe, I don't know if that was in confidential. I'm not gonna say it.
It's not.
This piece here. I think that was in,
Yeah,
non-public.
just don't mention that part of it.
Yeah, that was non-public.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna be handing out my paper tonight. Anyway, the conclusion was this. We determined that it's not a matter of if we're gonna provide a solution, it was a matter of when, and a matter of what that solution is. So we asked, we were interested in learning more about the cost for repairs of the properties, and if we could put a value on any opportunity cost by, say, for instance, not centralizing and not covering our equipment, as well as the timeline, and then, of course, the costs of doing these things. Boy, yeah, I really shot myself in the toe, because I can't pass this out. But I would ask at this time if Director Photo might be able to refresh our memories as to an exercise she went through in trying to put a number on improvements on various properties to get them to be in a habitable state.
So, we did an analysis, and I know all of the commissioners have seen the analysis. But it was about, and I won't go over it in great detail, but just for the general public, it would cost roughly $30 million to renovate all our facilities. And on top of that, we still would have inadequate facilities. We wouldn't have adequate parking. We wouldn't have a garage to house our equipment. We wouldn't have appropriate space for our mechanics to work on our equipment. So we would still, we would also, we'd have to find a new home for Park and Rec. We don't have that land. So there would be a number of obstacles to trying to renovate the existing facilities. I think just as a reminder, the biggest concern I have is really the aging infrastructure that we have and the conditions that we're asking our employees to work in. I know when I brought the three aldermen, they couldn't believe some of the conditions. I mean, we have people working in closets, we have poor air quality, we have inadequate bathroom facilities, and we, at Solid Waste and Park and Rec, there's one men's toilet and one women's toilet. That's it for all of those people. It's just, we don't have locker room facilities at Park and Rec. We don't have locker facilities at Solid Waste with all of that they do. We don't have locker room facilities, with the exception of wastewater, for women at all. So none of our facilities are ADA compliant. And we have, at the landfill, we actually have rodents in some of the offices. And, we have our environmental engineer is in a closet with the well tuner. So it's really, we're asking our employees to work in really horrible conditions. So I do appreciate the committee and the work that's being done to try to rectify this. We certainly are not looking for anything fancy. We just basic, clean, safe space for our staff. And
in conclusion, the goal of the group is to review all potential opportunities and then provide them to this august body and for discussion.
Correct.
We're not necessarily going to make a strong recommendation one way or the other, but we want to have the facts, compare them financially, compare them, we just want to make sure it makes sense for our community, our employees, and our taxpayers.
Commissioner Pappas.
I certainly don't disagree that we have really put off working on our facilities. I really do question that $30 million. I do question that $30 million figure, and I'm really unsure if we need to do all our facilities at once. I think if we started at the most difficult facilities we have, I thought it was interesting that Commissioner Ackerman had said, I know I mentioned this last month, but two of the commissioners were out, that the street department was supposed to have a second floor put in. And, I mean, that to me would seem somewhat cost-effective, and clearly Parks and Rec, they probably, they probably need to start from square one. I in some ways have thinking that it's unfair to the folks who live near the landfill to have all those trucks going out of one area at once. I think they already have the landfill there. There's already heavy truck traffic. And I really question if it makes us more efficient if we're having to sit there and wait for all these trucks to get out at the same time, because with the AFSCME contract, we all know the workday is from 7:40 to 2.
6:45 to 2:45.
Right. So if you're spending a half an hour a day sitting around waiting for the other trucks to move, I would argue that would make us less efficient. And I think we could do this in phases. And as far as the quality, the air quality in, I'm thinking if something's built on or right near a landfill, who knows if we build this brand new facility and then we find that we're going to have the same problems that we did with other facilities.
Commissioner Tease.
Again, I apologize, I'm going to leave after my comments, but I think you'll like what I have to say. And I want to assure all of my colleagues here tonight, specifically what you said about the second floor of the street department, that was discussed and brought up, and we intend for our findings and report back to be all-inclusive, and for us to be able to engage in a robust discussion, and to the extent we can, share that report in advance of the meeting, as long as I don't violate any laws. But I can assure you that was part of the discussion, will be part of the potential solution as well.
Well, I thought we were looking at moving the whole thing to the landfill. I thought that was the.
Nope, I said in the beginning, I said that we want to find a solution, whether that is to do renovations or to build a building. I think what probably makes everybody lean towards probably, oh, wow, we need to build a building, is the potential projected cost of $30 million. But we're going to exhaust all resources and ensure we report the facts and engage in a robust discussion when we have those facts.
Who came up with the $30 million? Was it the folks that were?
There was a very large committee that was put together that came up with the cost, and it's based on actual numbers that we were working with for construction. So I'm fairly confident with these numbers, but I will say that after spending $30 million, we would still have inadequate facilities because that doesn't give us room to park all of our equipment, and it doesn't give us adequate parking in our existing facilities. So, we will certainly look at all of this. I think the committee's goal at this point isn't, I don't think anybody has made necessarily, and Commissioner Moretti, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think right now the committee's goal is to try to provide safe, clean, adequate facilities for our staff, because I think that's one thing we would all agree on, is that currently doesn't exist. But we will make sure that any ideas that are brought forth by the commissioners are thoroughly vetted and brought back to this board.
Because last time, I really felt as if, I don't know if Commissioner Ackerman felt the same way, but we weren't getting updates, and then all of a sudden we have a big meeting with the whole city government and the public, and I really felt that like we were left out of the loop. And I also have the feeling that there's two of us who really are kind of invested in having the separate facilities. I think, and I won't, I guess I'll just speak for myself.
Commissioner Ackerman.
I look forward to getting Commissioner Tease's report. It's unfortunate that, it wasn't available today. I do have quite a few, I have more questions than I have answers for, and I'm sure the committee has the same amount of questions and discovery to go forward. I don't always think that being in one central location is always the best approach. I think divide and conquer. I think having multiple locations may be something to look at, but there's obviously a lot of due diligence that has to occur before we make any directions, strategic or tactical.
Mm-hmm. Okay. On to the director's report, I guess.
All right, we're going to go to the director's report.
And I think there are some slides that I'll be able to make glasses for. Okay, so exciting news today. The New Hampshire Plow Rally occurred, and Nashua came on top. We actually won the Plow Rally again. So Rob LaJoy and Eric Johnson represented Nashua, and so now we will be going on to New England.
Is this their second year in a row that they did it?
You know, we
Is it the
lost.
same folks?
No, we lost last year. The year before, we won Commissioner Pappas, and
But
then
is it
they
the
won
same two
again.
gentlemen?
Yes.
that- Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they when they lost, they had to go back and defend their titles. So,
Okay.
so they won. So very exciting news, and we wish them well at New England's, and hopefully they'll give us bragging rights. And it was particularly fitting, I think, too, because I actually in early May, I can't remember the date exactly, Lauren, but became director of the president, excuse me, of the New Hampshire Public Works Association. So the guys brought home a title for me as well, which is really exciting. So I also wanted to mention to you something that we've been involved in that is actually really near and dear to my heart, and really very exciting. There is a New Hampshire Public Works Memorial being built, and it is honoring all of those who have died in the line of duty working in public works throughout our state, both in municipalities and on the state level. And you know, we often forget how dangerous our work can be, and it's also a thankless profession. A lot of the time, oftentimes we're noticed only when something goes wrong instead of all the great things that are done. So it's really, this is something that a number of us have been working on. Some staff from Nashua have gone down to work on it. Actually, it's going to be at New Hampshire DOT in Concord.
Oh, okay.
And so all the communities have really gotten together to build this memorial. And a young woman by the name of Kelsey Lee, who was a senior at Colby Sawyer College, designed it for us. And there are 4 large black granite monuments that'll bear the names of all those who died while performing their public duties. And there's going to be a line of 24 inverted shovels that will represent every hour of the day that a public works employee may be called to duty. So, and then there are granite benches and so on. So there is going to be a dedication on June, trying to think of the date now. Lauren, do you know the date? It's June 5th? I think it's June 5th. And we're going to be, I don't know if you're familiar with Concord, but we're going to be lining Hazen Drive. A number of us are bringing vehicles down, and I'll be speaking on behalf of the New Hampshire Public Works Association, and the governor will be there, and the DOT commissioner, and a number of us. So very, very exciting, and I just wanted to share that with you because
That's nice.
It's really a nice thing. Okay. And it was all paid, I should say, this was all paid for with private funds. There were no public funds that were used for it. Okay. This is a berm installation on Peel Road as a water mitigation effort. This is just kind of interesting. There was a historical discovery on West Pearl. You can see some, when Liberty and Pennachuck were doing some work. Can you see the cobbles? there was an old cobblestone roadway that was uncovered, so
Oh, okay.
that's just kind of interesting.
That is interesting.
We replaced some sewer on C Street. And, of course, you've probably noticed that the paving season has begun. This is Westgate Crossing, and these are this is Sunshine Paving. And right, on the right, you can see HSI is doing some quality assurance testing on the asphalt. On Tuesday, May 14th, we discovered a sinkhole on Main Street at the intersection with High. The issue turned out to be an abandoned pipe. The street department filled the hole and made the repair. We had Mine Falls Trail Day, April 13th. We had about 20 volunteers that came by to clean up the park. And Crown Hill Pool is getting a new liner, and that is scheduled to be completed by the end of May. So so now all of our pools will have liners on them, which is really awesome. This is,
Are you gonna, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just thinking in terms of, for budgeting. We also did, we did a lot of the filtration systems. Are we gonna keep that on a rotation?
yes, the filters, yes, absolutely. Yep, good question. This is one of our employees doing rectangular field markings on Main Dunstable Field. The crews from the parks and streets worked together to make some drainage improvements to the field at Udicky. We partnered with PAL, and we had 75 children at the fishing derby this year. And it was not a very nice day, but nonetheless, we still had 75 children. On Saturday, April 27th, there was a cleanup of the Nashua River that was sponsored by the Mine Falls Advisory Committee. And Arbor Day, we planted a dogwood tree on April 19th. It was hosted by the mayor at Broad Street Elementary School. You can see Mayor Donchis and two of the students shoveling some dirt into the hole.
They did a lot more work than I did.
They're very cute. We added some additional netting to Holman Stadium. This cost was split with the Silver Knights. This will just add some added protection for the fans. I'm going through fast because I know it's getting late. The suites at the stadium received, I think I've mentioned this before, but new paint, carpet, furniture, and tables for the 2019 season. Looks really nice. We have a new accessible boat dock that will allow users to tie off their boats and load in as well as launch a kayak. So this is of course, the Mine Falls boat ramp near Conway. Some of our Park and Rec employees, Derek Taylor and Paul Haskell, installed a new sponsor sign and the next round of art to be displayed at the gallery on the wall at Rotary Common. And this is a picture of the gallery at the wall dedication. This is the dedication of the new art with Charlotte Ave students and celebration at the Labyrinth for World Labyrinth Day. And that was during the weekend of May 4th. Holman Stadium turf is looking really good, thanks to Scott Painter, Jim Mulvey, Rob Soares, and Eric Faulkner, who have worked hard on that. We had, on April 13th, we had 180 people participate in a citywide cleanup that included the rail trail, the Riverwalk, Salem and Toll Streets, and June Karen Park. Roger Parker, who was employed with the City of Nashua Public Works for 52 years, recently retired on Friday, May 10th. So we thank Roger for his service, and we wish him well. If you haven't met Mr. Parker, he's a very interesting character. Knows a lot about public works and has some great stories to tell. Just again, some sewer repairs. We repaired failed sewer service at 18 King Street, and also before paving on Kinsley Street. We located a deteriorated drain line, so we replaced it. We've been doing a lot of structural repairs. The This is a structure that had settled due to failing brick and concrete at the intersection of Central and Vine Streets that we fixed. We assisted transit with replacing a concrete slab for the new bus shelter at the Crown Street Park and Ride. The Watson Street Pump Station needed an emergency repair this month, so the crews were all suited up and replaced the flange and on the discharge side of the pump. They look like they're going to the moon, don't they, instead of into the pump station. The wastewater mechanics replaced some liners in the screw conveyors. The screw conveyors move solids from the presses to the trailer bays for transporting. The Phase 3 expansion at the landfill is well underway. It looks pretty incredible now that the trees have been cleared, so that's going to be moving very quickly now. Our first household hazardous waste collection was held on April 20th at the street department. And we just, as a reminder, please, no plastic bags and plastic wrap in the recycling. That really creates some problems for us and increases the contamination levels. So we ask, please, no plastic bags or plastic wrap. And last but not least, sorry, there were a lot of slides this month. I wasn't here last month. The Fort Hills landfill will be closed on Monday, May 27th in honor of Memorial Day. So curbside collections will, for that week, will be delayed by one day. Any questions?
Commissioner Ackerman.
Okay, just a very simple question. You mentioned the liners at the city pool or a couple.
Yeah.
I thought they were all concrete pools.
They were, and we put liners in them. So what the liners do is, it's probably self-explanatory, but we don't have to clean them now and sandblast them and paint them and all of that. So now it'll be a lot easier for us to open the pools, and we can open them, much more quickly. So
Saves
a ton of labor hours.
Labor, okay,
Yeah.
super, thank you.
So that they can be doing other things. So.
Very good.
Any other comments, questions? Now let's move to commissioners' comments. Do any of the commissioners have comments? Commissioner Pappas.
Just a question. Do you know when Liberty's going to fix the crosswalks on Concord Street, the ones with the...
I don't think the city engineer is listening to us right now, but did you hear that, Steve? Okay.
So we have some finish issues with some of the work that the contractor did from Cortland to Maine. And so they have to go back out there and restore some of those sections. And when that's done, then we'll deal with the crosswalks.
Okay. So that's where we saw the seams?
That's correct.
Okay, so once that's done, then they'll deal with the crosswalks.
Then we'll go back and do all the remaining striping, including the crosswalks.
And we have them this year again, too, don't we? Are they doing some of our work, Newport?
Yeah, they're finishing up some work from last year, yes. Yeah, so they have some residential streets that they didn't finish that they'll be finishing, and also the repurposed federal funds, they have some work that they'll be doing.
But we also have Sunshine this year.
And Brock's. So we have 3 paving contractors this year, which is going to be a tough coordination effort for engineering.
Right. So Newport is currently working on Broad Street, all that milling. That's Newport's work.
Right.
And they got to finish Amherst Street, Sunset Parkway, they got to get a finished pavement. And then about half of Kinsley Street would be Newport.
Thank you.
Alderman
Thank you, thank you. Since you brought up Kinsley Street, and it's a very heavily traveled road, I was just curious, is there a timeline at all on Kinsley? I think the city residents are very anxious.
Yes, there is.
Yes, so we reported that Liberty showed up earlier this year to do some more main replacement, section from Main Street all the way to Walnut. And they've done most of it already. We've been pushing for them to get it done in June, but they keep telling us it's too much work, it's too much work. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that they will be done in June. And once that's done, Newport will step in. Now, because it's a federally funded section of work, sidewalk tip downs have to be corrected, so Newport will also do that. So we're hopeful that the paving will be done by the end of July.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Any other commissioner comments?
Just one last one.
Sure.
I'm really excited to see how social media is taking off with the DPW. I see things posted at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. I know Lauren Byers is doing a great job there, so I find myself sharing that with a lot of, friends.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
That really helps us get the word out there.
It really
We
does.
appreciate it when people do that. Yeah. She is doing a great job. I'm sorry that she didn't hear it, but I will definitely pass that on to her tomorrow.
Personnel. Item A.
We have to.
Move to accept the retirement of Roger Parker effective May 10, 2019.
Comments?
Thank you for your.
Thank you, Mr. Parker, for 52 years of service.
Absolutely.
Unbelievable.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item B.
Move to accept the resignation of Randall Straw effective May 24th, 2019.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item C.
Move to unseal the non-public minutes for personnel from the Board of Public Works meeting of April 25th, 2019.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Yes.
Then we have to go into non-public, because we have
Certainly.
a couple of hires.
Is there a motion on the non-public?
Certainly. I move by roll call that the board go into non-public session pursuant to RSA 91-A, Section 3, 2, subsection B, the hiring of any person as a public employee.
Would Diane please call the roll?
Mayor Donches,
Yes.
Commissioner Ackerman,
Yes.
Commissioner Pappas,
Yes.
Commissioner Moriarty.
Yes.
Motion passes. And we non-public